This video is the final video of 4 where we're looking at conservative key thinkers as an introduction to their ideas and their lives and how they view the world. We're going to look at the 2 new right thinkers together, Ayn Rand on the left and Robert Nozick on the right, and their 2 key texts, Atlas Shrugged, written in the 1950s, and Anarchy, State and Utopia in 1974. Now, they are distinct key thinkers of the same branch of conservatism, so you'll see a lot of similarities between the 2. There will be some distinctions, but not as marked as if you were to compare either of them with Oakeshott, Burke and Hobbes. I think if you've got a 9 marker, it wouldn't necessarily be wise to compare differences between these 2. I think it would probably be better to look at one of them against Oakeshott or Burke or Hobbes. And what you might find when you come to study neoliberalism is a lot of similarities between the ideas of these key thinkers, particularly in the area of the economy, with those neoliberals. So you'll see some crossover there. Okay, first of all, we'll talk very briefly about Ayn Rand. Born in 1905 in Russia, died in 1982 in America. So Ayn Rand was a Russian-born American philosopher, and we need to think about the context of that. Ayn Rand's family fled Russia in the wake of the revolutions of the early part of the 20th century, and she is moving from one side of the Iron Curtain to the other. Her family are fleeing authoritarian government in the name of communism and moving to what is referred to as the land of the free, the home of the brave, and capitalism and capitalist society. And Ayn Rand fully buys into that libertarian outlook. And so what you're going to find is that Ayn Rand embraces laissez-faire free market economics, but also believes that selfishness is a positive, and to think of the self is the right and moral thing to do. And so what we're going to see is everything that Ayn Rand is arguing in favour of is with the freedom of the individual at the heart of it. Robert Nozick is another American, born 1938, died 2002. Like Rand, a libertarian, writing and working slightly later than Rand was. But as I said, as a libertarian thinker and philosopher, he is also going to base his concepts, his ideas, in the rights of the individuals and a minimal state. And that is particularly important when we come to not just the role of the state, but the economy too. So for new right thinkers, Robert Nozick and Ayn Rand, we'll talk first about how they view human nature. And they both identify that us humans yearn for individual freedom, and we have an innate ability for individual enterprise and innovation. And great things can come of removing any restrictions, from the life of the individual. So they tend to have a more positive outlook on what human beings can do when they are unencumbered by the state, which is radically different to the idea of Hobbes. Hobbes was arguing pessimistically that an all-powerful sovereign is needed to control the negative elements of our human nature, whereas Rand and Nozick are far more positive when it comes to what human beings can achieve without the involvement of the state. And those ideas seem to be far more in keeping with the work of classical liberals like John Locke than conservatives like Hobbes and Burke. However, there is one area that Nozick and Rand both identify a similarity with Hobbes, and that is this idea that, yes, we love freedom, but we are pack animals, we are not just individuals, we do work for a common good. Now, that is less so the case for Rand, but we'll come to that when we look at the state later on. But there is this idea that periodic restraint on behalf of the state was necessary, and also respect for communities whose bonds are deeply rooted. And so you can see there are some similarities. Like Hobbes, Rand and Nozick very much agree that we humans are driven by self-interest. The difference is, for Hobbes, that needs to be shackled, whereas for Rand and Nozick, that self-interest can flourish. Now, there is some elements where human nature should be contained to provide peace and stability, but the less the state does in the eyes of the new right, the better. So let's move on now to the state. And if we remember, Oakeshott and the One Nation Conservatives were arguing that the state is a ship and the captain does not have a destination. There very much is a destination when it comes to the new right. And that is to make the state as small as possible. And you're going to hear the phrase, the rolling back of the state. And we saw with One Nation Conservatives an acceptance of the welfare system and that has been created in the wake of the Second World War. However, Rand and Nozick see welfare as an attack on personal liberty, and the involvement of the state in limiting individual freedom should be removed. And so both Rand and Nozick are arguing for as small a state as possible. And that is in keeping with the libertarian branch of the Republican Party, historically and today in the United States, but also the Thatcherite wing of the Conservative Party. The smaller the state, the freer the people. And Nozick goes as far to call taxation in the name of a welfare state legalised theft. And he also compares it with slave labour. The idea that wealth is seized, wealth is taken from the individual who has created it to be indirectly given to those who have played no part in creating that wealth. And for Nozick, that is theft. That takes us on to society, and I think it'd be important to talk about Rand when we look at society. But the new right rejects the concept of an organic society and little platoons, and actually the view of society is very similar to classical liberalism or neoliberalism. And rather than thinking of these little platoons, these communities, instead Rand advocates for what she calls atomism, that society is a collection of individuals seeking selfish ends. But remember that Rand wants us to think about selfishness in a different way. Whereas Hobbes wanted us to think of selfishness as leading to chaos, Rand wants us to think about the good that can come from self-interest. And both Rand and Nozick challenge the scepticism of earlier conservatives. And they want us to think about the good that human beings can do, the change and the innovation, the betterment of the society as a whole that can come from allowing individuals with the ability to do so to thrive. And that means embracing selfishness, embracing individualism, and allowing people to behave in the ways that they wish in order to create that innovation, that change. And this is another huge sort of step away from the conservatism of the past. For Rand and Nozick, these traditional values should not be used to hold society back. And so to place restrictions on the life of the individual because that's how things have happened historically, that is not just, that is not right. The state should not limit individuals in society because of the customs of the past. And that is because we are rational and make good decisions. And that is where there is far more similarity with liberalism than conservatism when it comes to the new right thinkers. And one new right thinker is Margaret Thatcher. And in probably, sometimes it's misrepresented, this quote, but one of the things that Thatcher is quoted on the most behind this quote about the enemy within is she once wrote, "There is no such thing as society. There are men, there are women, there are families." And what she's talking about there is that atomism. The idea that we place our own interests first, but also we have our family, our small community that we wish to protect and want the best for them. So that quote from Thatcher, "There's no such thing as society," quite often misquoted, but essentially is designed to mean that the individual cares about themselves and their very close loved ones over all else. Okay, finally, and this is probably the biggest distinction from previous Conservatives, the new right and the economy. And Oakeshott talked about the state not wanting a destination, but there very much is for the new right. The small government, free market, small government, low interference, low taxation. The freer the market, the freer the people. Now that seems to be far more in keeping with classical liberalism, or possibly the economic outlook of Burke, than certainly with One Nation conservatives like Oakeshott and the concept of paternalism. The idea here is that the state should be rolled back, that the state has, in a slow sense, crept up its involvement in the life of the individual. So from Rand and Nozick, what they see in this so-called pragmatic approach of One Nation conservatism, all they see is this creeping socialism, this slow increasing involvement of the state in the lives of the individual. And they seek to reverse that from an ideological standpoint. So that pragmatism of the One Nation conservative, the pragmatism that past conservatives prided themselves on, has disappeared. A low tax, low government spending economy will reward the most deserving for their hard work. And the idea there is that hard work breeds success, which breeds wealth, and you are punishing hard work and success by taking away an individual's wealth. Now, the great assumption that the new right has made there is that those things are mutually exclusive. The harder you work, the more successful you will be. People will challenge that, both conservatives and liberals and socialists alike, but we have to assume that assumption is correct in order to understand the mindset of Rand and Nozick. Hard work equals success, equals wealth, and to take away an individual's wealth is to take away their incentive to work hard, because you are both telling those who have earned the wealth that it is not theirs and it will be taken away from them, but you're also telling those without the wealth that they do not need to work hard to assume that wealth. They can get it through other means, and society will actually stagnate. The economy and society will stagnate. People will not change. People will not innovate. People will not seek wealth creation, because they know the state is going to intervene and take it from those that have made it and give it to those who haven't contributed. And remember that it was Nozick that said that this was like forced labour, that you are encouraging people to create wealth only to take it away from them. And for Nozick, that was unjust. Now, there are some that would say that is sort of a denial of conservatism, and others that would actually advocate that it allows conservative principles to be realised in an indirect way. You've got the Reaganomics of America and the rolling back of the state under Thatcher. So we see this new right economics in the UK and USA in the 1980s. The so-called trickle-down economics of the Reagan era, the idea that if we free the wealthiest in society, that wealth will eventually trickle down to those who do not enjoy wealth. And then in the Thatcher era in Britain, we've got this concept of removing the role of the state, privatisation, reduction in the welfare state, reduction in the offering of social housing, and that those things will create a property-owning, competitive society where individuals are inspired to achieve more rather than rely on the state. Now, I did say that some conservatives would argue that this view of the economy is not conservative at all. However, the new right would turn around and say that by disengaging from the economy, by taking the state out of the economy, it can concentrate on only what it needs to do. So for Nozick, the state is a night watchman. Now To use a cricket metaphor, if you're a night watchman, there's not a lot left in the day's play. You come out and the whole concept is not to lose your wicket. You're not there to score runs, you're not there to do a lot, just don't let the other side take another wicket. And so the night watchman comes out and does as little as possible and tries to cause no damage. And that's what Nozick is arguing for, a night watchman state that does as little as possible, that tries to limit and prevent damage. It is not active in what it is trying to do. And for Nozick and for Rand, this state, this night watchman state, can then only intervene when it is necessary to, in order to provide law and order and stability. And that will create not only a prosperous economy, but a stable one. And the new right will argue that by removing the state from the economy, the state can concentrate only on what it is set out to do, which is stability and law and order.